Well, it just continues a very long, ongoing saga, doesn't it, Gemma? And so no matter what the decision was today by the federal court, it was always going to be the next step along the journey. And it looks like that journey might now continue. But just to recap, as you have said, his appeal, Novak Djokovic's appeal, has been dismissed. His application, I should say, not an appeal, an application to review the cancellation of his visa has been dismissed. So at the moment, we know that Novak Djokovic is in detention, and what he is facing now is deportation from Australia. The court has adjourned. We just have to sit tight for a little while longer to see whether his legal team will consider perhaps seeking leave to take this to the High Court. But that is still all very much up in the air. And of course, more of the facts will become known as time goes on this evening. The court has done incredible work to reach a decision so early in the afternoon after the hearing finished just a couple of hours ago. And as you mentioned, reasons will not be published until a later date, potentially sometime tomorrow.
Tracy, we're just going to bring in now some live pictures that we're getting from outside the courtroom in Melbourne with the supporters and their reaction to this. They're gathered in a similar fashion to last time when Novak won to a reception of uproars and appeals there. Now, tell us about the arguments that were presented in court. As we know, with this decision that's just been made, we don't have reasons behind it as yet, but tell us about the argument from both sides.
The argument from both sides essentially went this way, that the Minister for Immigration determined that his staying in Australia to compete at the Australian Open could lead to the inciting of social unrest, that he was effectively a danger to Australian health and security. Now, Djokovic's legal team was arguing that, the arguments framed around that, suggesting that people who were anti-vaxxers and it would give rise to an anti-vax sentiment, they argued the same thing would happen if they sent him home, if they deported him. There was no reason to suggest that, that the same sort of rise in anti-vax sentiment might not still happen. So they were the reasons. That's what they considered. And the full court, as you mentioned, 3 judges sitting today to make this final. So, in fact, they can't appeal this. They can only seek leave to go to the High Court if they want to take it further.
And Tracy, of course, time is of the essence here.
It certainly is, because Novak Djokovic was scheduled to play on centre court tomorrow evening in the primetime evening session. Ash Barty, the world's #1 female player, was on first. Novak Djokovic, the world's #1 male player, was to follow her encounter. So at this point, it looks unlikely that that will be happening. If Novak Djokovic is deported, his place will be taken by a lucky loser, the next one who didn't qualify. He will take his place. But yes, it's going to be a huge reaction internationally. You're seeing some of the shots there of the Serbian supporters who have been behind Novak Djokovic in his attempt to remain in the country and to play at the Australian Open. But of course, there'll be all sorts of scenes taking place in Serbia, his homeland, in Spain, where he lives, and right around the world, because this story has really garnered international attention like not many other sports stories do, Gemma.
Yeah, it's still a relaxed atmosphere as we're seeing there outside the court. Can you tell us again, Tracy, about what is happening in court at the moment?
So at the moment, Novak Djokovic's legal team will be discussing whether they have any grounds on whether to seek leave to be able to appeal to the High Court. There would also be some discussion as to exactly what happens now. And I guess from the government's point of view, they'd be looking at the deportation order, which will stand, and just how quickly they can get Novak Djokovic out of the country.
And this has made, huge news all over the world, and this decision as well, which is the big one, which will probably spell out that he can't in fact compete. It's going to be big news everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, Gemma, and I think this has ramifications, not just for this particular tournament, and it has affected every player already, because they haven't been able to concentrate on their own mission because they just continually get asked about the Novak Djokovic situation. So in one way, there'll be a lot of people that are very happy that this might seem to be over should Djokovic be deported, but it has long-term implications as well, because a deportation order means, of course, that he can't come back for 3 years unless he gets special exemption or special circumstances. And who's to say whether he would want to come back to Australia having gone through what he's just gone through in the past week. But it also has implications for other events. And, you know, the Tennis Open next year, we're talking about the FIFA Women's World Cup, which will be staged in Australia in 2023. You've got nations potentially qualifying for that, whose vaccination rates are below 10%. We're lucky. We live in a lucky country where vaccination rates are up over 90% for first vaccination, at least. Not all countries think the same way as Australia. Not all countries have had their borders closed in the way that we have. Not all people approach vaccination in the same way that Australians have. And many Australians would say, and the government certainly would say, that, you know, it's a lesson to the world. We have shown the world what we can do by keeping as many people as possible out. But this also leads to, you know, some athletes who may potentially be looking at coming here in the future, or some tournaments or international events, just not knowing which way they might be treated. If they have an exemption, will it stand? Will that exemption be torn up? Will it be reviewed? Will they have to go to court? These are questions that legitimately athletes and major sporting events will have going through their minds at the moment when thinking about coming to Australia.
And Tracy, you did touch on this a moment ago, but can you expand on what this means for Novak Djokovic as an individual and in his career, not being able to compete in the Australian Open this year?
Well, he obviously, as everybody knows who follows tennis or sport, he's standing on the cusp of being the greatest player of all time, with 20 major victories alongside Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. Potentially, in defending his crown here at the Australian Open, he would have become the winningest of all players of all time as far as majors go. He already is, if you're talking about other tournaments. So obviously that is not going to happen. He won't be making history here, it would seem, with the result of this decision by the federal court. So he will take his chances now with the other 3 Grand Slams, and also it will come down to what sort of exemptions they can provide to allow him into their countries. The French Open, the French sports minister has already said they'll be giving him an exemption to play, so he may make history there. Other than that, I think long term, you know, all 3 of these top players are ageing. They're in the twilight of their career. Novak Djokovic potentially thinking that he might have a few years left, but it's unlikely that he may ever return to Australia.